Hello and welcome to I Talk to Ghosts, the podcast that isn't afraid to let you see it cry when Halloween is over. I know, brave words, and we are just about to head into spooky season now. I'm one of those people that believe that all of September is Halloween Eve. I'm your spooky host, Jennifer, a spirit medium and a teller of ghost stories. And speaking of crying, tonight's spectral theme is of weeping ghosts, including the legend of La Llorona, which was suggested by dear friends and supporters of the podcast, Raven and Jenna. Thank you for supporting the podcast and for being such spooky, fun friends. After the tales of wailing ghosts, I have a new spirit reading to share with you with my latest podcast guest, as well as a bit of a mini seance. Join me to see if this week's message from the spirits is specifically connected to you. That's later on in the podcast. But for now, grab a tissue. The chilling, crying ghosts are reaching for you right now. This happened when I was around 7 years old. My family and I were living in an old 2-story house that was in a state of disrepair. The house had had a creepy attic and a basement that my sister and I never dared to enter. One night, my parents were sleeping in their bedroom, and I was in my own room, wide awake and trying to sleep, but I was very thirsty and my mouth was dry. I didn't want to wake up my parents because they had to get up very early in the morning to go to work. So I decided to go to the kitchen and get a glass of milk. The kitchen was just down the hallway, just a few feet away from my room. When I got there, the first thing I did was to turn on the lights. But I still felt a little scared, being up alone by myself at night, so I tried to turn on the small TV we had in the kitchen, but it was unplugged, and the outlet was too high above the corner for me to reach to plug it in. I started to drink my milk when I heard the terrifying sound of a woman giving a low moan as if she were crying. It sounded like it was coming from the hallway, a few feet away from the kitchen. My whole body went numb with fear. Terrified, I ran to my parents' room and told them I had heard someone crying, but they told me it was probably my sister trying to scare me, even though what I heard was clearly a grown woman. They decided to let me sleep in their bedroom that night. A few weeks later, I was alone in the house at night, and when I went into the bathroom to take a shower, I heard it again, and like last time, it sounded very close to me, as if it was in the bathroom with me. I jolted out of there, went to my room, and covered myself in a blanket, terrified, and stayed like that until my parents came home. After the second time, I never heard the crying again. Luckily, we moved a few months later. About a year ago, I remembered these incidences, and I talked to my parents about what I heard when I was younger. My mother didn't know what to make of it, but my father told me that in the same house, something similar happened to him. He said that one night he got up very late to go to the bathroom, and he saw a woman sitting on the stairs. The woman was sobbing. She was holding her hands to her face, crying. My dad thought it was my mother and asked her what was wrong, but the woman gave no response. Then, when he left the bathroom, the woman was gone. When he returned to his bedroom, he saw my mother sleeping. The next morning, he asked her why she had been crying on the stairs. My mother was confused and told him she had never been awake that night, let alone crying. To this day, I wonder who or what that woman was. It was during the summer when I decided to take a trip to Mexico to visit my family. I was about to join the Marine Corps, so my mother wanted me to go see my extended family before I left. At the time, I was with my girlfriend, who would later become my wife, and I didn't want to leave her alone, so I bought her a ticket so she could come along with me. Everyone around my grandmother's house was curious, and a lot of our extended family came by to meet my girlfriend. After greeting everyone, we all started to talk about what had been going on lately. My girlfriend was sitting next to me, having me translate parts of the conversation. An aunt who knew I was into the paranormal brought up the subject of La Llorona, the wailing woman. My mom quickly told my aunt to be quiet, but I was really interested in hearing her story. She proceeded to tell us about how whenever she would sleep over at my grandmother's house, at which we were currently at, if she stayed up late enough, she would be able to hear crying the wails of La Llorona. My mom rolled her eyes and jokingly nudged my aunt, and the topic died from there since one of my other aunts changed the subject. Seeing how serious everyone had gotten for a brief moment, my girlfriend asked what they were talking about. I told her the myth of the wailing woman and how she was destined to walk along all the rivers of Mexico looking for her deceased children. That night, my parents decided that my girlfriend and I should stay at our old house where I grew up. The house was currently being worked on, so the bedrooms had no doors or working lights. The only doors the house had were the ones that led outside. They were fairly new, but they were your standard metal flimsy doors that a kick or punch would make rattle throughout the house. Inside, we had to use a candle and a flashlight as our light source. I remember we even used a bed sheet as a temporary door to give our room a little bit more privacy, even though it was only us staying there. My girlfriend and I stayed up a little while talking, and eventually we both fell asleep. I don't know at what time exactly, but something woke me up. I realized that my girlfriend had stolen the covers, so I slowly tried to get them back. I was debating closing the window that was located right above our heads when I heard a long wail. It was drawn out and distorted. I could hear raspiness in the voice, as if she had been yelling for such a long time that her throat was getting ready to give out. I don't know if it was the scratchiness of her voice or what exactly, but it reminded me of an old creepy record playing over and over. My girlfriend started to stir and woke up. I was both excited and scared at the same time. A cold chill traveling down my spine just reinforced my fear. The wailing grew louder, making it seem like she was slowly heading towards us. There is a myth that if you hear the wails close, she's actually far away. But if you hear them far, she might be somewhere near you. My girlfriend half smiled and asked, "What is that?" Thinking I had asked my aunts to scare us. I just motioned for her to be quiet and listen, and she realized something was wrong. Another loud cry passed by, echoing inside the house. My girlfriend started shaking, terrified of what could be outside. I had my left arm under her head, and I could feel tears running down her face onto my arm. Each time a cry rang out, she would shake a little, and at the same time I would hold her close. The wails eventually came to a peak where it sounded as if she was outside our window. I pulled the covers over us, and we tried to remain as still as we could. The wailing eventually faded out, and we thought that she had gone. We attempted to stay up for a while longer to see if we heard anything else. But eventually, sleep took us over. I haven't been to Mexico ever since, but I'll never forget the crying wails of that woman. When my mom was 10 years old, she stayed at her friend's house to play for the day and then to sleep over. The daytime had been normal, riding bikes, playing, typical girl stuff. When night came, they knew it was time to go home once the streetlights came on. They were sitting in her friend's room, radio on, listening to music and playing a card game. It was already dark out, and the music from the radio filled the room. My mom's friend lived with her mother and grandmother, who both spoke fluent Spanish. My mom could understand it, but could not speak it. As my mom and her friend were playing cards, my mother began to feel uneasy. This feeling developed into an overwhelming sense of anxiety and terror. Suddenly, she could hear crying outside. The girls both heard it, but told each other it must be a stray cat or something. Soon, the crying became louder and more obnoxious, like it wanted to be heard. The crying became so loud, it resonated over the music they were playing. Both girls placed their hands over their ears, fearful of what was happening. The grandmother burst into the room, holy water in one hand and a rosary in the other. She was yelling over the crying, praying in Spanish. My mother said that when she did this, the radio started to static and the lights began to flicker. Both the crying and the praying boomed extremely loud until it went quiet. It all stopped. The grandmother said a prayer over my mom and her granddaughter and made them go into the living room, instructing them not to return to that room for the night and not to look out the window. My mom returned home in the morning, not speaking of what had happened. Even when she tells the story now, An overwhelming sense of fear takes over, and she gets the shivers. Do you have a personal ghost story you would like to tell me? I may share it on the podcast. Email me at speaknow@italktoghosts.com. Hello and welcome back to I Talk to Ghosts. My guest this evening is Terese. Terese, welcome to the podcast and your reading. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing really well. Pretty excited to be here. Thank you so much.
I am so glad that you reached out for a reading, and I've been doing some prep work and I have my notes here. I was initially getting some, I always say mother, grandmother energy because the energy comes in sort of the same because a grandmother is a mother. But I'm wondering if your mom has passed?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, she is coming in with a lot of loving energy for you. Impressions that I am getting are, there seems to be, and this isn't true for her now, I want to stress that, but there does seem to be, people present themselves in ways that we can recognize them in life. It doesn't mean they're still this way now, but I do get some sense of a little bit of anxiety and little bits of, feelings of safety, like those things were important to her. Does this make sense? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I would definitely say that she was an anxious person in the sense that she had some distrust with people around her. She had very few close friends. They were, and her children were very close to her and dear to her.
Yeah.
And when put in the right context, her anxiety would come out. But
sure. Well, true. Like I can relate to that even, right? Does some of this stem from her own childhood and hardships? Or did she always just feel that this was something she kind of just inherently had in her?
It would be a combination, probably some genetics playing a role. Yeah, and her life was challenging at times.
Yeah. There's talk of hardships and a little bit of her childhood feeling tender. Does that make sense?
Yeah, she lost her dad when she was only 15. So.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
A lot of poverty, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, all of this is lining up. But with her, I'm also getting the sense of a whimsical side to her. And I don't know how much she expressed this to others, but she had a really lovely imagination. And her, and so when I say whimsical, it's like, wow, the way you can dream and imagine, just very, seems very rich.
It was. Yeah, she was very creative. Writing, drawing, yeah, it was like, I wish I could be that imaginative and creative. Yeah.
Were you when you were younger? Because she was showing me some child drawings that perhaps were maybe even on the fridge with pride, or just, there are some child drawings involved as well.
Yeah, she always had our drawings up, like paintings up in the kitchen. And she kept those I think they're still there at her house. She had like a chest sort of for each of us. And she kept our school reports, all of our art, all of our books that we made in school. Yeah.
Exactly. Like it feels like there's a sense of glowing, loving pride with that. Like
Yeah.
I'm seeing like sunshine on them. It's just like these were dear to her. And I know with a lot of children, they're just drawing factories, right? And it's drawing left and right. And some parents are like, yeah, oh, lovely, cute, on to the next thing. But like this meant something, this was something that she really cherished. And it also kind of fed right into that whimsical again, right? Encouraging that imagination in her children and wanting to relate on that level.
Mm-hmm.
Other components that kind of lend as examples to whimsy: fuzzy socks or comforting socks or stuffed animals.
Yeah, Mom she was like a knitter.
Oh, okay. Great. I wrote down knitting texture. Okay. Let's talk about cartoons for a second. Did she watch cartoons?
She loved watching cartoons with us. We'd rewatch as many times as we were allowed to.
Yeah, and she had the patience for that. This brought her joy.
Yeah.
This wasn't just, turn on the TV so the kids have something to do and they'll leave me alone.
No, it was never like that, ever.
Exactly. And I'm pulling in her having a blanket on her lap.
She was a person that when she sat on the couch, she would always have a blanket on her.
Dipping kind of back into the past. Issue with the car or some kind of long drive, and there seems to be a sense of worry of unknown connected with that. Does that make sense in any way to you?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. My mom passed from a brain aneurysm, but there was like a drive to the hospital prior to that, and then the ER was closed, and then Mom said, no, just take me back home. I'm okay. And then it ruptured in the vehicle. But my sister was with her. She was probably quite worried at that time and frustrated and
conveying that sense of worry and the unknown. It was almost like didn't know how it was going to be at the end of this drive,
Yeah.
And I think she is bringing that up because obviously this is a big moment, right?
Yeah.
And wanting to acknowledge it in order to offer some comfort there that it seems like it was the big unknown, but she is okay. She is okay now. And to remember her for all these amazing personal, creative ways that she lived her life. And this kind of ties into the message that I wrote down for you. Because the first thing I wrote down was, remember all the goodness, and if you think of her, think of that, because she's smiling at you. She's just shining on you. And the rest of the message is create more of your own joy going forward and then defend it. No one's negativity is worth trading your happiness for, is what she says. And then there's also talk of perhaps nudging you towards a goal to aim towards going forward. Like picture where you want to be in a couple years and commit to it. Start now, because that time is going to pass. And when it does, you're going to want to look back and say, yeah, I started, look where I am now. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. Well, wonderful. Thank you so much for meeting with me today. Your mom just sounds so amazingly sweet, very creative, and the type of personality that you want to protect them. You know what I mean? You want it because we cherish it. Before we go, do you happen to have a personal ghost story that you would like to share?
Yeah, and it's interesting because it sort of ties into what you've been saying, and it ties into my mom.
Listener ghost story.
As you know, my mom passed, and this happened recently, probably maybe 3 months ago. I had this really bad dream, and it was recurring a couple nights, and I don't know, I just felt that there was something like dark down in the hallway, like by the bathroom, and I was just kind of spooked out. And this was a dream, and then it felt like this figure, this darkness was like coming up to my room, and it didn't get in there. Couple nights later, after I'd had this dream 2 or 3 times, then I think I'd gotten up and went to the bathroom, and then I went back to bed and laid down, and all of a sudden I couldn't move. So I had sleep paralysis. That's probably what many people would call it. But the thing is, I had just been up, so I wasn't really falling asleep, but I had this intense feeling of danger and fear, and I knew instantly whatever I had been dreaming about had gotten in the room, and it was there.
Oh, wow.
So then I kept telling myself, okay, I'm surrounded by light, I'm protected. Wasn't working, wasn't doing anything. And I'm like, well, if God's out there, can you help me? Because I'm agnostic. I don't have that faith. So that didn't do anything. These were all split-second decisions because I could not move, and I'm terrified. That was, at this point, the scariest thing that had ever happened to me is in regards to that. I'd only ever had sleep paralysis one other time, and I often see things at night. When I wake up, it's in the middle of the night, they're standing, looming over me, but this was by far the scariest one. And I couldn't see it, but I felt it. And then all of a sudden, in my head, I just yelled out for Mom. I said, Mom, I need you, Mom, come here, Mom. And then all of a sudden, light. Like, love was gone.
Oh, that is amazing. And yeah, kind of describing how, like, I keep saying it's light, it's shining on you, and here we are tying that back in. That's so beautiful.
It's very spooky.
Amazingly spooky. But also, your mom is with you. She's absolutely with you.
There's been a lot of other things that have happened, but I won't get into that. It'd be too long, but
I'll just have to have you come back. Well, thank you again. This has been amazing. Would you like a free spirit reading with me and record your reading for the podcast? Sign up for your chance to be selected by visiting italktoghosts.com/guest. And as an added bonus, if you don't want to leave your reading up to chance, I'll let you in on a secret. There's a discount offer to book a private session with me, so you can book a date and time for certain. Visit italktoghosts.com/guest for more details. I can't wait to meet you. Hello and welcome back to I Talk to Ghosts. I have a message from the spirits this evening, so thank you for joining me around the seance table in the candlelight. Tonight I am working with snowflake obsidian. If you're not familiar with this stone, it is really wonderful to have it near you when you are moving through difficult times, especially grief. I like to ground and center, call a spirit close. Tonight I have with me a woman. She's showing me that she was very smart and was a mentor to you. And not only that, she was just such an anchor for your emotional energy and was just so good at clearing the fog and centering you and helping you sort through things, and also guided you through your path in life, which was similar to her own. Specifics about her, she's showing me she kept candy in her desk, as well as she had a habit of fidgeting with some sort of figurine that was on her desk. She would grab it and kind of keep it in her hands when she was talking or thinking things over. She's also showing me that you two had a favorite dinner hangout that you would always go to, and it's hard for you to go to that restaurant now without her, and she doesn't want that for you. She wants you to be able to enjoy it still. She's showing me that you're feeling lost without her, that you have a lot of indecision and you're not quite sure what to do, but she is very much encouraging you to breathe and center and even feel her close. Let her energy still guide you if you need it, but she fully believes in you and has faith in you that you are very capable in life, and you will be able to make decisions going forward, and because believe it or not, you are good at it. She says that she held space for you and that you are completely capable of holding space for yourself still. And she's offering that if a current decision has you perhaps moving out of state or cross country, she's very excited about that idea. So if you're excited too, seriously explore it. She says you have a lot to offer this world, and so many people could benefit from knowing you. So never forget that and let that guide you. I think I'm going to leave it at that. If these messages connect for you, I would love to know. So please reach out and maybe we can do a full reading together. Thank you. Book a medium reading with me. If you have a past loved one you would like to connect with, a spirit reading can be an amazing and never spooky experience. I strive to give you specific details that align only to you and your loved ones. Curious? Visit italktoghosts.com for links to book with me. I can't wait to meet you. And with that, dear listener, we've reached the end of this episode of I Talk to Ghosts. I hope you've enjoyed the spirit work that I've shared with you this evening, as well as those chilling tales of crying ghosts. Have you ever heard a weeping ghost of your own? I would love to hear about it. In the meantime, wherever you wander off to in this world or the next, just remember, come back and visit with me. Have a lovely evening and good night.